come report is all those extra meetings. I don't think they paid us for any of them.
Oh, you're
Joe.
A second by Mr. Smith on the minutes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oh, you have something on it?
Yeah. The very last line is talking about the approval of the 8-month probationary periods. It doesn't say we approved it. We did, but maybe that ought to be added.
Say the very last one.
Very last paragraph under personnel.
Oh, yeah, it does. Yeah, we did approve that.
We did approve it, so that ought to be added.
Yes. Just that one minor change
Yeah.
on the personnel, where we did approve the full-term status on that staff. Your motion, second, still the same? So those,
With that correction, yes.
with those corrections, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion approved. Need approval of the March agenda, please.
Approve the March agenda.
Motion by Mr. Moran.
Second.
Second by Mr. Solsky. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion approved. Items postponement, withdrawal. Anything, Joe? On a postponement or withdrawal?
No.
All right. And then on the consent agenda be the next item, which we have one item, I think, Joe, or two.
2 items.
With,
Item A, the vacant property, and item B, the Oxford Place LLC. Development plan, both.
So our first item for consent, first application is FSP 2018-07, the Beckett property. It's a final subdivision plat to divide one tract into 3 5-acre tracts with a remainder tract of 33 acres located at 4642 Muddy Ford Road. Is anyone here in opposition to that application?
Are you here for that one? Were you here to hear that application on Muddy Ford Road?
We were here to get more information about it.
Okay. It was gonna go consent unless you wanna hear, I mean, I can give you more information about it, but if you wanna hear the.
I'd like to hear more information
Okay.
about it.
So that one is off the consent agenda. Next application is PDP 2018-08, Oxford Place LLC, preliminary development plan for a 4,900 square foot retail building to include a Domino's restaurant located at Falls Creek Drive and Cincinnati Pike, US 25. Is anyone here in opposition to that one?
I would like to have more information if possible.
Okay, that one is also, will be heard.
At workshop, we talked about the doghouse. It does have one small variance, so there's no opposition among the commissioners.
That's the one that I think we could have put in there, right? Was everybody fine with that variance?
I think I'm all right.
I think I was fine with it.
The variance was for the separation, distance between the axes.
Yeah.
So small area. Is anybody here?
Is anyone is here for PDP 2018-10, the Doghouse preliminary development plan for a 2,437 square foot restaurant with a 27 square foot patio area located at 100 Darby Drive. Is anyone here in opposition to that application? Would like to hear more about it? If not, we will take a motion.
I'll
on
make
it.
a motion
With the
with the one variance of PDP 2018-10.
motion by Mr. Solsky,
I second it.
second by Mr. Smith. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion approved. Charlie, you want to swear everybody in before?
Yes,
this?
everyone who has signed in to speak tonight, if you could please stand, raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the statements you're to make tonight to be the truth to the best of your information and belief? Thank you all.
What's his name? Billy? Joe, can we ask Mr. Billings if we can move these other two ahead of
Oh, sure.
their application?
Sure.
Mr. Billings, The other two applications we have are they're gonna be pretty short. Would it be okay to move them up?
That's fine with us.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Thanks, sir. Our first application we'll hear then tonight is FSP 2018-07, the Beckett property. Did she leave? Oh, Michaela's got it, doesn't she? Oh, one second.
All right, this application is a preliminary subdivision plat request to subdivide 3 lots from a parent tract from a larger farm on Muddy Ford Road. The parent tract is approximately 40, let me get to my staff report here. 48.11 acres. Includes an existing entrance. It's on the east side of Muddy Ford, north of Oxford. The existing entrance is here for the farm. The request is to subdivide 3 tracts off it. Originally, the 3 tracts were going to be 5 acres in size. We went through TRC, and we kind of, at that time, we advised the applicant that one of those needed to be 10 acres. Or they needed to go through a zone change. But after rereading the language in the A5 district, it states specifically that 3 or more tracts between 5 and 10 acres requires the zone change to A5. So actually, they would be allowed 3 5s. So you're allowed 3 tracts between 5 and 10 acres. So we advised the applicant that the original submittal was fine, and they could do 3 5s. I've scanned the wrong version, so I scanned the corrected version. So the tracks will be 3 5s in a row, and this is split right here. So actually, track number 3 includes the pond in the area south of this red line or the extension of these 2 lot lines will just continue straight back. So that 10 is actually 5, and this is consolidated with this larger tract. So the farm will have a remainder of 33.11 acres, and then there'll be 3 5-acre tracts to the south. They're going to be sharing a new entrance. Muddy Ford's a state road, so they'll have to get state approval of the encroachment. They have to get a state encroachment permit and approval of the entrance location, but their states indicated there are no issues. At least they've indicated no issues to us of that entrance location. They will have to get that permit before the final plat's approved, so they'll still have to, if they haven't gotten it yet, I know they're in process, so they'll have to get that permit. Only 3 tracts can share an access easement. This access easement will serve just only 3 tracks, so it doesn't extend beyond and serve more than 3. So, and then the lot dimensions meet all our A1 requirements, which is 250 feet of width at the building line, 50-foot setbacks, and reservation of right-of-way along Muddy Ford. So we are recommending approval with the conditions, 6 conditions listed in the staff report. Those are essentially standard conditions, with the one exception is the state road, since the state road will need state permit of the encroachment, the new driveway. And that's...
Any questions for Joe? We'll let the applicant speak first, and then we'll... That's yours. Any questions for Joe? Thanks, Joe. Okay. The applicant, Joe, are you here for that?
Yes, sir.
Do you have anything to say on it, Joe?
I think Joe's pretty much covered it.
In agreement with all the recommendations?
Yes.
Any questions for the applicant? Thank you, Joe. We'll just see what her concerns are, and we'll address those real quick. Ma'am, if you'll come up to the microphone. If you could just state your name and your address.
Wendy Reeder, 4690 Muddy Ford, right next door.
Thank you, ma'am.
I'm concerned, this already has 3 trailers sitting on it, this property. So I'm concerned, will this be more trailers sitting on this property? And is this going, Muddy Ford, these 3 tracks going from back to front? Am I looking at this right?
Back, front.
From the
forward,
pond
back.
to Muddy Ford?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. I didn't think there was that much space from the pond going forward.
Are you south or north?
Pardon?
Are you south or north of this? North. Well.
Thanks. Next door.
She's north.
After,
After the driveway.
yeah.
Yeah, she's north.
So there's a trailer sitting, there's a pond, and then so many feet forward, there's a trailer sitting there. And a drive, and then Muddy Ford. So I don't know where we're getting 5 acre tracts out of that.
You're talking about these
Joe,
trailers
can you help us
are
out on that,
occupied?
any?
Just show her the Muddy Ford Road
Can
there,
you help us
Joe.
out on her question there, any, Joe? Yes, sir. Can you show us where the trailers are?
Along up in
Yeah.
front, in here, there are 2 mobile homes and then a residence.
Okay.
Now, I think there's only one pond, isn't there?
No, there's one on up there. There's 2 ponds really on there.
Yeah, well, there's kind of a chain, but yeah, I mean.
One? Yeah. There's one trailer right in front of the pond. Here's the pond, here's the trailer, Muddy Ford.
It's probably on the
And
other
then there's a
track.
pond, that pond up there is on up toward the road. It goes dry
Actually, Muddy
sometimes.
Ford's
Uh-huh.
here.
Yeah, Money Ford's running down.
So Muddy-
It goes that way. It's confused on the road.
But there are 2 down front, there are 2 down front, and then there's the home, the home,
Yeah. Muddy Ford, if I'm looking at this right, is,
right here.
yeah, okay. So, the pond, as I said, I live right next door. The pond, the trailer is in front of the pond, and drive, and then Muddy Ford. I don't know.
Is it the smaller pond up in here, there's kind of a chain of them. I
Anybody
think
know
that's
of
probably
another
what
one?
you're thinking of, yeah.
I don't even see how the drawing shows Muddy Ford being right there.
This is Muddy Ford right here.
Yeah,
It's the Muddy Ford Road right
So
there.
this is the pond that, you're probably thinking of the pond up here.
yeah. That's not shown on
It's
there.
not shown. No, it's not shown on there.
Shouldn't they be
Right.
showing this
This
stuff?
already existing, they're not splitting up this area, they're just splitting up. No, this 33 acres will remain the same, it's next to it.
That answer your question, ma'am?
We don't understand the drawing. We live,
Not at all.
I live next door, she lives next door to us.
So where, do you see 4690 address?
Could you come up to the microphone, please? State your name and address, please.
Chris Walter, 4714 Muddy Ford, right next to Wendy and Charlie. I'm just still trying to figure out the drawing. Is there residence on there, 4690?
No.
Okay.
It doesn't show up, it's up here.
Okay, yeah, right there beside, I guess I see the drawing now then.
Yeah,
So
that's Reeder.
what's on the bottom of the drawing? What's the other pond and the 1 and the 2 and the 3? Is that?
That's the lots.
That's what they're separating off.
That's the lots they want to divide off of the parent
Okay.
tract.
So you guys' home is on the other side of all that land?
You're up in here somewhere.
Yeah. Okay, I see. You want me to ask anything else for them? I mean, are they gonna be homes that are built or?
I have no idea.
Yeah, it's 5 acre tract, so there's,
Yeah, there could only be one residence, it could be a mobile home or a modular home at any one.
Right,
So it could-
okay. Thanks.
thank you. Is there any other questions? If nobody has any other concerns, we'll,
Joe, you did say that track 3 would be shown different than what that is there, right? It'd be a 5 acre tract, not a 10 acre.
Yeah, and I have the plat actually.
Oh, he's got a 10-acre tract, it should be a 5-acre tract?
Yes, comes
But if most of it
here now.
include all the
okay,
pond,
okay.
or most of it.
Pretty darn close to the very edge, it looks like.
It's pretty good size pond, but it goes dry right here. This one. Then they've got another
Yeah,
pond
and it looks like it'd be.
right in here.
Heck, if I connected the dots.
Ready for a motion?
Any other questions, comments? If not, we'll take a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd move for approval of FSP 2018-07.
Motion by Mr. Smith for approval.
I
Second.
second.
Who's second?
Two of us did.
Right at two.
Good choice.
Miss ladies first.
Ladies first.
Miss Mizell makes the second. All those in favor say aye.
Is that the recommendations? Is it with the recommendations? Aye.
All those opposed? Motion is approved.
With the 6 conditions of approval.
Yeah.
Next application, here is the
Oh, I don't know.
Oxford Place LLC. It's PDP 2018-08, Oxford Place LLC. Matt?
Thank you. This is a preliminary development plan for a 4,900 square foot commercial building. It's located, the project site is located in Falls Creek and currently is zoned B4 PUD. The acreage that they're looking to develop is about 0.735 acres. This is an aerial photo of the area. I've kind of placed a star here to indicate the project location. So if you're familiar with it, it's just north of the BP gas station that's already built there. Just to sort of get our bearings straight. And then as far as the zoning, as I mentioned, it is located in this commercially zoned portion of the development.
I forgot, Matt, I gotta recuse myself on this one. I'll let Mr. Vice Chairman take over. Thank you.
No problem. So yes, like I was saying, it is in the commercially zoned portion of Falls Creek, and just north of the gas station, which is located on this parcel here. I guess before I get into that, going through my staff report, this is in compliance with the concept plan that was approved with the zone change and subsequent updates to it. It's been planned as a commercial area since 2004 when the property was originally rezoned from agricultural and annexed into the city. As far as the requirements of the B4 zoning district, in the staff report, they're listed out as items A through H, and their plan does meet all of those requirements of that zoning district. Things like building setbacks, minimum lot sizes, street trees, things of that nature. As far as the access to the site, it's probably not going to be terribly easy to see on this, but here at the gas station, there's a stub street that comes off of Falls Creek Drive and goes north. That'll have to be, obviously will have to be extended north to provide access to the project site. Another thing that I note in the staff report is that we will need a plat that creates the right-of-way for all of Falls Creek Drive. If you look at the plats that exist for that area now, it's clearly labeled as an access easement that actually only provides access to the gas station and to the apartments located about here. So what we would ask for, and what I've listed as a condition on this application, is that we get that right-of-way platted so that people can use that road freely without fear of being of trespassing. These things that I point out here are some minor issues with the development plan that certainly can be corrected pretty easily if the application is approved between now and the final development plan. The drive aisles, I noticed on the drawing itself, were labeled as 27 feet, but on the detail they're labeled as 24 feet. That's think just a minor labeling issue that could be clarified. And then the other one that I've noted is that the access road, as they've labeled it, doesn't quite scale to what's been shown on the typical street section. So that's just another minor issue that will have to be corrected before the final development plan, or if the roadway is platted. And then lastly, they are showing an appropriate area for the landscaping buffer to screen the property to the north. On the final development plan with the landscaping plan, we will need them to show, all the trees and or shrubs that are needed to populate that buffer area. But they have indicated an appropriate area for that.
Matt, what did you say about 24 listed? Where was the list saying 24 parking spaces?
Oh, no, it's not the number of parking spaces, it's the width of the drive aisle is listed as 24. Oh, I see. You mean my note down here?
34 parking
Gotcha.
spaces.
Yeah, that was, I kind of glossed over that. But yes, they are showing an appropriate amount of parking. What I've noted was that in the site statistics, that's not shown on this, but it's on the copy you have in your packet. It listed that there were 34 parking spaces, but if you actually count them up, there's only 24. 24 is sufficient to meet our regulations, so I figured it was more of an issue, something that needed to be straightened out, the numbers matching what's shown on the final development plan, since 24,
You
as
count
I said.
34, Matt.
You count 34?
Mhm.
I don't know.
I
I don't know,
think-
maybe I miscounted when I was making the PowerPoint. Oh, gotcha. Maybe that's what it was. One way or another, it meets our requirements either way, whether it's 24 or 34. We just need the number. The number in the site statistics needs to match the number that's actually shown. Sorry about that. So as I mentioned before, it meets the requirements of the B4 zoning district. We will need the access road to be constructed before we approve a final development plan. If you approve this preliminary plan, we will need the sidewalks to be located within either the access easement or the right-of-way. However they plan to do the access road, it'll need to be located in there to avoid trespassing issues, and then we'll just need the parking to sort of match both the site statistics and what's drawn. So my findings on this are that the preliminary development plan does match the uses shown on the concept plan or the master plan, depending on what you want to call it. The traffic study that was completed in 2004 with the zone change, did anticipate that these properties would be used commercially. So I don't think that there's going to be any traffic impacts that weren't anticipated when the property was rezoned. And then the last finding that I have was just that, the 0.735 acre area that they're wanting to develop doesn't exist as a standalone lot yet. So that's another condition that I've placed in my recommended conditions of approval, that area actually be platted and recorded, with road access, with all the necessary utilities before we would approve a final development plan. Looking at my recommendations, I am recommending approval of this. Condition 1, as I mentioned, is getting that the final plat recorded to create this lot. They are planning on bringing the preliminary plat to you next month for that. Condition 2 is getting Falls Creek Drive right-of-way platted so that it can sort of move along on its process to being adopted by the city. Condition 3 deals with the sidewalk along the access road. And then all of the rest of the conditions are fairly standard with our preliminary development plans. I think there's more on the next page, yeah.
Any questions for Matt?
Matt, I had one thing I wanted to mention. Will this lot be similar to the gas station adjacent as far as being cut deep down into the bank up there is very high?
I don't know right now. That's something that the applicant could address. I don't believe that. I don't believe we didn't have a preliminary grading plan submitted with this, so I don't know.
It has a big big drop.
There
like-
is,
Like the one that's
yeah.
next door, I think the only thing that's up there now is maybe a plank fence. With all the
Yeah,
traffic
you
there,
mean,
two intersections.
you mean along
I
25?
think there needs to be a guardrail or something up there. If an accident could happen, somebody could be pushed off and they'd go over that bank and be down on top of cars, you know.
That
it'd be-
was just, that was brought up at the technical review meeting and discussed with the state. The state was there.
They denied it.
They're aware of the condition. They're proposing a fence to extend the fence along the top of it.
Just a fence?
Any other questions?
Mark my words, one of these days somebody go over that. and
Thank you, Matt. The applicant?
For the record, I'm Bruce Lankford here with the applicant, Chris Reich, seated here, and the engineer, Pat Darnell, is next to Chris. Report's okay. We like the report. The recommendation's good. We always take recommendations that are favorable. We'll answer any questions that you might have. Chris, if you have, Chris, any questions of Chris or Pat Darnell, we're here to see what you want to know.
Any questions? No, I think we're good.
Okay.
Sir, you wanted to speak?
I just wanted.
Oh, you just wanted to hear? Okay.
Thank you.
No one else want to speak? In favor or against? Any other questions? Then I need a,
I did have one other question. Will this be served with one road in, one out? I mean, there won't be a continuing road through there, will it? Just be an in, one way in, one way out?
As far as I know, it'll just be the one road.
But there is a plan for that to continue through and connect at some point later?
I mean, there is another connection on the main.
On the main.
So eventually, I would assume that it would be that, but depending on the plot, I mean, depending on.
Now it'll be a dead end. It'll be the-
Connection or a road.
Connect up there by the bank.
Yeah. No.
if not, I need a motion.
I make a motion to approve application PDP 2018-08
So motion by Ms. Mizell,
with all,
I would
with all
second.
the,
Second with the 12 conditions approved.
yes.
Mizell, and seconded by Mr. Smith. So all in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Our next application will be PSP 2018-05 Betty Yancey Griffith Trust Property.
Moving on.
Okay. This is PSP 2018-04. This is the preliminary subdivision plat request for approval for the Yancey Farm. You saw this zone change in November. City Council approved the zone change to R1C PUD and C1 on this property for 122 acres total. I think the C1 was about 17.81 acres. This is north of Ann Mason and Royal Springs Schools and east of Stonehenge subdivision. Right up against the northern urban service boundary of Georgetown. This is, you can see the general location, how it's oriented towards the school and Stonehenge. The zone change was approved with, I guess, what I'd say is 4 special conditions that are more related to the PUD than to any other. It was approved with more than 4 conditions, but the 4 that are related to the PUD approval are that there's this 150-foot landscape buffer, which typically isn't required of new subdivisions. It was added specially to screen Stonehenge from these smaller lots across the street. So the 150-foot landscape buffer, the increase of the landscape buffer around the perimeter, our ordinances actually say you need a 10-foot buffer against the USB, and I think a 10-foot buffer adjacent to A1, and then 15 adjacent to the railroad, or some combination of that. But we increased them all to 15 foot. So the perimeter has this additional requirement of a 15-foot perimeter buffer. Traffic study noted traffic improvements required on US 25 at both entrances, and then the signal timing adjustment needed down at the intersection of Champion Way. So there was a requirement that that applicant pay for the traffic improvements on 25. The additional condition that the average lot size be 7,500 square feet throughout the subdivision. R1C typically has a 7,500 square foot minimum lot size, so that would be the minimum. You got to go above that. In the PUD, since they're providing open space and other things, the condition was added that just the overall average lot size be 7,500. And then this is in an area that we did a watershed study, dry run study about 10 years ago, roughly. It recommended certain best management practices and protection of streams within the dry run watershed. One of those is that a riparian buffer be provided along all existing blue line streams in the watershed. So we added the other condition specific to this is that they follow the dry run study when developing this property. The concept plan and zoning showed just the back part. The first part, they were asking for R2, so they didn't have any single-family lots shown. So the concept plan really just showed the back side and then the open space, and this was blank in the front, but it did show the main entrances and the road, the general road layout and the buffers, land use buffers proposed. So the preliminary subdivision plat will have to follow the concept plan approval generally, and it does, but this area up front wasn't shown, so they were really reviewing the front as we would just a preliminary subdivision plat. It doesn't have any specific guidance for the lot layout other than the buffer in the main collector roads. PUD zoning, or plan unit development zoning, it's an article in our zoning ordinance that allows for flexibility in development. If you plan out the whole subdivision as a whole and you get either you get a PUD zoning in place when you rezone the property, or if the property's already zoned, you can apply for a plan unit development and develop the subdivision that way. So the section in our zoning ordinance that allows for plan unit developments basically says you're allowed flexibility in the lot arrangement, the lot widths, and the lot sizes overall, as long, and you can vary from the underlying densities and uses allowed in the district that you're in if you get approval of the Planning Commission. And the Planning Commission can allow reductions in these requirements if the developer can satisfactorily show that the overall subdivision conforms with the intent of the district that it's in, and doesn't circumvent the requirements of that district, and doesn't circumvent the intent of the zoning regulations. And by allowing the flexibility, the Planning Commission can add special conditions to the development that wouldn't otherwise be required in any other non-PUD development, conditions that aren't in our ordinances necessarily, but are reflective of or apply to the development that's being presented, maybe due to its context, what's surrounding it, the nature of the land that it's being developed on, so forth. So you can add special conditions that otherwise wouldn't be applied to subdivision developing as a standard R1C subdivision. So the R1C is our smallest lot residential zoning standard. It requires a 70-foot lot width, a 7,500 square foot lot area, so total lot area, front setbacks of 30 feet, side setbacks of 10 feet, and rear setbacks of 25 feet. A maximum building coverage of 40% of the lot. So if you have a 10,000 square foot lot, you can have 4,000 square foot of buildings. So that's not pavement or anything, that's just building area. A 4.4 units per net acre is the maximum density in the district. And net acre is calculated in our zoning ordinance as the gross acreage minus the road right-of-way, so the area dedicated for internal roads. The applicants are requesting a variance of the standard area and dimension regulations by asking for a reduction of the front setback to 20 feet, the side setback to 7.5, and the rear to 20. They're asking for a reduction in the lot widths to 50 feet, and the lot area, the minimum lot area of 4,550. So these are basically the lot sizes are being reduced and the setbacks are being requested for reduction. And overall, which I'll get later in my report into, is they're over the maximum net density if you calculate it based on the definition in our zoning ordinance. Okay. Here's just a general look at the front part of the farm. It's in 2 sheets, so because of the size of the farm, in order to get the detail, it's shown in 2 sheets. They are showing a 150-foot landscape buffer along the front. In their last submittal, they're showing lots in that area, but they're at workshop. We discussed this for a while, and they are. I think they're going to propose amending that to remove the lot area from that front buffer. But I'll let them talk about the amendments that they're requesting. But they are showing the 150-foot buffer in the front. The general lot layout is similar to the concept plan. The 2 main entrance roads in the same location, serving lots that are essentially on cross streets to the collectors. They're showing 3 stub streets to the adjoining farm to the north. They're showing the 150-foot or the 15-foot perimeter landscape buffer. They're protecting one cross mature tree line that's kind of separates some fields on the farm. That tree line is the one at the top of the hill that you can see from US 25. They've got some other, things specific to this subdivision that we don't typically see, but they're providing a multi-use trail along the main collector road, a farm 4-plank fence that'll run the length of both of the main roads to kind of provide some uniformity to the entrances. I won't kind of go through their whole proposal. I'll let them do it. But the area zone C1 is shown as open space. This is a creek that runs down to Dry Run. They're protecting that area. They are showing the lot areas intruding into the floodplain in the back, and we've recommended against that. So I think they are going to propose amending that. But let me go ahead and get to my, my concerns or my review comments that are in the staff report. As far as their setback reductions, the 20-foot front setback The reduction to 20 feet really hasn't been very successful. I don't believe in Georgetown. If you reduce it to 20 feet, it might work for a townhome type situation where you might have parking in the rear or trying to create a certain, a townhome type streetscape. If you get too many lots with 20-foot front setbacks, you get a lot of parking overlapping the sidewalks. Cars that don't want to pull all the way up to the garage are going to overlap the sidewalk, and you get a lot of parking issues. You get the street with full of cars. You get a lot of on-street parking. It just hasn't been a very. We don't think it's a good idea to allow a setback below 25 feet, and definitely 20 would be the maximum if you're going to have front-loaded garages. So we're recommending that 20-foot front not be approved, and that it be limited to 25 feet in the front. But the other setbacks we don't really have a major issue with. 7.5 is the standard kind of city side yard. There is an ordinance that you can't go below 7.5. You need 15-foot building separation for fire access. So we couldn't go below that, but 7.5 is pretty standard. 20-foot rear is pretty common in city subdivisions. As long as you have enough building area where you can, have the ability to add on to your house or add a deck or covered porch in the back. The 20 is usually in a utility easement. There's some easements in the back anyway. 20 foot is really seems to work okay, so we don't have any issues with that. So we are recommending the 25 and not the 20 for the front, but the others we're okay with. The overall layout has a high degree of smaller lots. The original proposal was for a mix of lot types to allow for a mixture of housing, larger, estate lots and smaller starter home lots mixed throughout the subdivision. We only saw the back half of the proposal. So the front half seems to be more, had less of a mix of lot sizes and more of the 50 and 55 foot. With those lot widths and the depths that they're proposing on these lots of 110 feet, they create a situation that may be varying from the intent of the R1C, which is really with a minimum of 70-foot width and 7,500 foot in size. The intent is really not for all the lots to be, or the majority of the lots to be starter home lots. It's for a larger lot subdivision. So we're recommending that, similar to the Abbey at Old Oxford, which is an R1C PUD that was recently amended, came before the Planning Commission in, I believe it was the fall of probably 16 now. They were limited to 55 foot lots and larger in width. I think that would be appropriate for this subdivision as well, being an R1C PUD. So we're recommending that the minimum lot size width, minimum lot width be 55 feet. So all the 50s be increased to 55. And the minimum lot area be increased from 5,450 to 6,000 square feet. And essentially with a 55-foot lot in the 110-foot depth that they're showing, it would kick all those lot areas up to 6,000 anyway. So those two kind of go together. So you can see this is the area in the front. These are a mixture of 55 and 50-foot widths. So we're recommending that these 50s be increased to 55. We're recommending that this lot area be taken out of the landscape buffer as well, which I'll get to in my next comment. And then also these tree preservation lots, we're recommending that the depth of those be increased in order to protect those tree preservation areas. And I guess I'll explain that now, but the landscape buffer area in the front and the open space in the rear, as I just previously showed, was shown as being encroached by lot area. We don't think that was the intent when Planning Commission and City Council approved the concept plan, and we're recommending that those lots, the area in lots, be taken out of that landscape buffer and out of the floodplain in the rear, so that those be kind of separate HOA lots. And the areas then aren't to be used to calculate the average lot size required of 7,500 square feet. The net density that I talked about earlier, the definition, the zoning ordinance is that net density is calculated by the gross acreage minus the road right-of-way. The gross acreage is 122.2 acres here. Floodplain was 17.85 acres, which the floodplain was not residentially zoned property. It was C1 property. It can't be built upon, so that took that out of the calculation. The road right-of-way was 20 some odd acres, and they're also dedicating right-of-way on US 25. So take all that out, it leaves 80.53 acres. Multiply that by 4.4, and you get the net density of 354 lots, and that's the net density on the acreage remaining if it's calculated based on our zoning ordinance definition. So the PUD bonus, that the lot bonus above that they're asking for is the difference between the 461 lots and the 354 lots. So that bonus essentially is what you're given as a PUD by providing other amenities, meeting special conditions, providing kind of things that are benefit the community or the city in general in order to be allowed the flexibility and the increase in density. I'll kind of, I don't know if I talk about that later on, but I circled this just because lot area in the open space, which I talked about, they also show, there's also this area in the back that's zoned R1C PUD, but it's not really accessible. It's on the other side of Dry Run Creek. They're showing a driveway crossing Dry Run Creek to serve these lots. They're not easily served. You can't get a subdivision road back there. It's not easily sewered or accessed by utilities. And in the zone change concept plan, it was shown as open space. So I'm recommending that area not be allowed to be calculated in the minimum lot area, since it was shown as open space in the original concept plan. So that's kind of why I showed that. Other issues that came up in review, the street layout. There's a main collector road and then local roads that serve the lots. We're recommending that that road hierarchy, the road widths, meet our standards in our subdivision development regulations. There's some non-standard items shown within their road profiles. I think all that stuff can be worked out by staff before construction plan approval, but I just wanted to point out that was one item that came up in review. I guess the other thing is the landscape buffer along 25. They did show the 150 feet in the planting kind of schedule, as far as they're proposing 2 rows of trees, 20 feet on center, or 40 foot each row, 40 foot on center, so a combined 20 foot on center offset with a 6 foot mound and a horse fence. The image was provided at zoning. It's essentially going to look something like this. They didn't really we're not at the point where we know what species are going to be planted or what size. So I recommended in my staff report that they be 10 feet high at planting, just because the first thing that they're going to have to do when they put in the road improvements is take down all the trees along the road. So they're going to have to clear those trees out. So it's going to open up the farm to the street and to Stonehenge. So I'm recommending that that landscape buffer be planted first with their first phase of construction and before the first lots are platted. And I recommended in my staff report a minimum 10-foot high tree and a 2-inch caliper. Our landscape ordinance requires for deciduous trees a minimum of 1 3/4 caliper. It doesn't set a minimum size, but 1 3/4 caliper tree is going to be about 8 feet tall, I would say. And evergreens are a minimum of 1.5 inch caliper with a 5-foot height. So, although we're recommending 10-foot high at planting, I think at a minimum we want to see what's in our landscape ordinance: 1.5 inch caliper for evergreens with 5-foot height, and 1 3/4 for deciduous. I think if it's planted at with the first phase of construction, they'll have time to grow up before. The applicants have indicated they're not going to develop the front part of the farm first. They're going to develop the back behind that tree line that they're protecting. So it'll be should be screened for a number of years before that front part's developed. So I think if they planted at least with our, meeting our landscape requirements, and they have 3 years to grow, I think staff would be fine with that. But I just wanted to set some type of standard without knowing, when I wrote the staff report, how the development was going to be phased. Other items, the karst areas, condition of zoning and a condition of my staff report is that they meet our environmentally sensitive land ordinance, which requires karst areas or environmentally sensitive land areas to be identified and shown on the preliminary plat. They have shown some, but Ben and I went out there and walked. It seemed like there were other areas that were could be karst. There were slumps. There were areas that water was standing. So I wanted to put in here, and I've added as a condition of approval, that they'll still have to meet that environmentally sensitive lands ordinance if, when they do more engineering and more testing, if they find more karst areas, they find environmentally sensitive areas, they'll have to avoid those areas and follow the requirements of our ordinances, because they may show lots in an area that might have karst. It doesn't mean they're guaranteed those lots. I know if they run into something that they're going to have to protect those areas. They can't necessarily build on those lots if they're in environmentally sensitive areas. And the last thing is the drainage. Ben's pointed out, and I've added it in the conditions of approval, that there's a lot of water that passes through the site from Stonehenge. There's a series of karst areas in Stonehenge. Water passes through under 25 and through the front half of this development to the school. That area was wet when we were out there, and we saw, some features that look like they might be environmentally sensitive. But when they do their drainage studies, they're going to have to take all that into consideration and calculate the pass-through water and factor that into their drainage study. As I said, if things turn up, they'll have to still follow our requirements, even if things show up in areas that have lots shown on them now on this preliminary. So recommendations, I guess, just to summarize, and I've gone through most of this already, but the variances, the PUD variances that they're asking for, we're recommending approval of. The variance number 1 is the separation between their 2 main entrances. Our subregs say those main entrances to an arterial should be separated by 1,200 feet. The northern one aligns with Stonehenge, so we've kind of asked them to line it there. So that kind of restricts the southern entrance. So we're okay with that reduction in separation. We're asking for a minimum lot width of 55, not 50 as they asked, minimum front setback of 25, and a minimum lot area of 6,000 square feet. And those vary a little bit from what they've asked for. As far as recommendations, I think I have 24 recommendations. And I hesitate to go through each one, but I will try and skim through the ones that I think you may have questions on. The first one, the open space that they showed, they didn't really show any open space in the front in the plat that we reviewed, other than that landscape buffer, and a lot of those lots extended into the landscape buffer. So that's kind of where that first comment goes. We think as part of the PUD, they should provide some usable open space to the front half of the subdivision, or at least connect the front half to the open space in the rear some way, so that there's some uniform planning of the open space. Number two, the lot depth on the tree preservation areas. We've run into issues with tree preservation areas not being, when lots are created and the houses are being built, the trees become a hindrance to building if there's not enough depth to the lot. So in order to protect those trees in tree preservation areas, we feel like the lots need to be deep enough to make it practical to protect them. So we're recommending that all the lots that back up to tree preservation be increased to 125 feet in depth. Right now they're at about 110. Most of the lots are 109, 110 feet deep. I think most of the lots that back up to tree preservation are about 110 feet deep. Recommending that the area in the back on the other side of the floodplain that's fairly inaccessible not be used to bring up the average lot size. That was a condition of zoning. I think that average lot size condition was really to apply to the residential lots, so the residential buildable lots in the subdivision itself. The area in floodplain zone C1 shouldn't be included in the lot areas and included in that lot area calculation either. Number 5, the encroachment permit should be applied for and received, and the improvements made on 25 prior to platting the first lot, so as part of the first phase of development. Number 6 is redesign the kind of street sections to meet our current regs, and we've kind of, I think that's something that staff can work through some of those issues with road width and right of way. 7, the berm be installed along with the roadway improvements with the first phase before the first phase is platted. 8, that they follow the dry run study recommendations. 9, that the blue line streams identified, again, follow the dry run studies recommendations on riparian buffers and be identified, those riparian areas be identified and protected during development. 10 is that off-site drainage be calculated into their stormwater management plan. 11, that the drainage channel that drains through the front will require jurisdictional determination by the Army Corps of Engineers as to whether it needs a permit through them. 12, these are all related to that drainage in the front. When we walked the site, we saw some other kind of iffy areas that they be reevaluated in the drainage study and the geotechnical study prior to construction plan approval, or as part of construction plan approval. 13, any work in the floodplain, any creek crossings shall meet our floodplain ordinance, flood damage prevention ordinance. They're showing a paved connection to that lot area in the back, and they're showing it as a low stream crossing, low water crossing. It's recommended that that be a bridge passage to allow free flow of water. And some of these are a little technical that we don't usually get into this level of detail, but because there are some unique features to this, we've kind of added some of these extra conditions. 15, there's a City of Georgetown ordinance regarding the HOA covenants and restrictions in common scheme of development that they follow. They follow that ordinance. Construction plans they submit with the construction plans. They follow the landscape ordinance along the front and meet at least our minimum landscape ordinance requirements. They follow our Georgetown Stormwater Manual as part of construction plan review. If there are any wetlands, they be permitted properly. No lots shall directly access Cincinnati Road, and that means, the HOA lots or any of the pass-through areas don't add another access, that they use the two that they're showing, the two main accesses, they get their access off that. That's all that means. And I believe the rest are standard requirements for new plats. That's all I had.
Does anyone have any questions for Joe at this time?
Save them for later.
Thank you, Joe.
Yes.
You got one, Mr.
Well,
Wise?
at least one, yes.
Uh-huh.
Could you go, there's a slide you had back there that had our requirements and then what you were willing to grant, going in red or something. Can you go back to that slide?
I think it's that one.
That's what they are requesting. There was one later on where you said what you would recommend.
Oh,
I think
okay.
6,000 square foot instead of 54. Can you go to that one?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Looks like there's an awful lot of our standards that are we're being too lenient on. And you alluded to the fact that they were giving extra space, green space, something that would contribute to the community, and as a result of that, you were willing to reduce these. Did I understand you correctly there?
Yeah, I think the PUD standards in our zoning ordinance gives the flexibility, so it allows for flexibility. So this is what they're requesting, and yes, we are recommending that they be allowed these variances based on the kind of the open space design and the other elements of the subdivision, if they meet the conditions that we're proposing.
To me, that doesn't make any logical sense, because the standards were set up for a reason. And because they're doing something else for the community, it does not negate the original reason for setting up those standards. For example, a couple of analogies. Suppose in Rob's field of expertise, suppose I'm building a house and the building inspector comes near the end and he says, sir, you don't have ground faults receptacles in your bathroom. And I say to him, well, I thought if I put extra lights in the kitchen, that would negate my need for doing that. Well, of course, that standard was set up for a reason, to keep you from being electrocuted in the bathroom when you're trying to dry your hair in the shower, And putting the lights in the kitchen extra doesn't have anything to do with that standard. So to me, the reasoning is not logical there. We ought to stick to the standards that were set up for a reason. And of course, it's nice they're adding these extra space, but I think we ought to stick to the original standards. I can't say that we shouldn't vary a little bit on one or two, but as far as just giving them the store,
yeah,
it seems to me like that's not wise.
These aren't variances to health safety issues. I mean, it's set up, the allowance, the flexibility is granted in the zoning ordinance so that you can provide environmental protection or, other, the ability to, say you have, you want to do all 70-foot lots. Well, you come into this piece of land, you may cover the whole thing with 70-foot lots, including, all the tree areas, all the, environmentally sensitive areas. You might include all that in the lot area. Now, a lot of that you have to protect anyway through ordinances. So, but the reason that it's there is to allow flexibility to provide for the ability to design a better subdivision. So
if we would give them on one thing and require higher standards on another, give and take, I could see that. But we're giving them, every one of these is being reduced. And it seems to me like that's going too far from the standards that we have set.
Frank, I would mention one thing. I don't think there's been any mention yet. Joe hasn't come up with a calculation. If all these things are followed, I'm pretty sure that the density is going to come down from 462 probably. What would you estimate it might be if all these things are followed?
Well, that was the 354, wasn't it?
354, yeah.
354. So we're giving them 107
354
lots.
would be the net density if they follow the net density. Were you talking about my recommendations if they just followed my recommendations?
They follow these.
442.
That was 442. I thought I said the number 442, wasn't there, someone joke?
I think
it'd
the
drop
applicant might have a better idea of what it would be. I don't know.
I seem like I've seen it somewhere already. It would be like 442 or something. But we'll let the applicant speak on that. Better idea.
So that's almost a 30% increase from the 354, which is what, 4 point something units per acre to the much higher value. I forget what it was. So that's a big increase, not just a small concession, it's a giant concession. It seems like that's too much for us to give.
I might be speaking on something I don't know what I'm talking about, Joe, which I do a lot of. I think if we wanted to keep it at the standards we have, wouldn't we have just kept it at R1C and not made it R1C PUD? Right? If we
Yeah, I
wanted
mean,
to try
if
to
you
do that,
just wanted
stay
seven-
with the standards we have, we stay with the R1C instead of giving them the PUD. The PUD just allows them that flexibility is what I'm understanding.
Like some would be larger and some would be smaller, so there's a lot of flexibility as far as variation. But the average, it doesn't change what the average should be, does it?
It should be.
I think it
That's how I
does.
feel.
I think it does because of the preserved land that they're putting into it too. Am I
There is a lot.
speaking
Well, I
right?
mean, they can ask for a variance to go above what the minimum is, and that's what they're doing.
I know, but we don't have to grant it.
Well,
No.
I'm
No.
not
We
arguing
don't.
for or against. I'm just.
But like the number 4, most houses in Georgetown are only 7.5 feet apart.
Yeah, no problem.
And then we have approved many houses from the 30 to 25. We've approved many lots that size. And a minimum 55 foot, we just approved. What'd you say, Abby? Got the same approval on that one.
It's the last one that bothers me the most, I think.
That
It's
square
just,
footage.
you know, just try to cram so many lots in there.
Yeah.
The reason for the 75 is probably keep it from being so super dense.
But when you look at that square footage right there, that 6,000 square foot, I can take you to many subdivisions out here smaller than that.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
I don't disagree. We haven't made the same mistake before. but-
Yeah, there's a lot of subdivisions out here that have been planned the same way as this one, because this is probably one of the largest subdivision plats that we've had come up here in a long time. Other than the Abbey last year. In my time on this commission, it's probably one of the largest we've had.
Yeah, it
We didn't have it for
definitely
10
is.
years.
It's been a while, so.
10 years.
I mean, there's probably a lot of stuff we're seeing here tonight that none of us have really seen before, but it's happened in the past that, just because I've been around these subdivisions, I know what's going on. But, I mean, the stuff that's probably been passed with more variances than what this is
Well, it could be.
right here.
I mean, I
But
think
I understand where you're coming from too, Frank. I do.
also the minimum lot, single-family lot size we allow is 7,500 square feet. So, I mean, there's a demand with development costs, land costs. I think every application we're going to get in, unless we change that minimum, I could almost guarantee every application we're going to get in, they're going to be asking to go below, do a PUD to allow some variance to go below that in order to have the ability to even develop the property in the city.
And I will say this, it was an excuse in Stamping Ground for years, because Stamping Ground used to have a 10,000 square foot lot size. And a builder came down there when I was on the city commission and asked for it to be reduced to 75, just so he could try to make money on the property, to make the lots more affordable. And Stamping Ground finally adopted the 7,500 square foot also, which the whole county is now, every city is now, that I know of.
The proper profit for the developer is not something we ought to be
Yeah.
considering one way or another. Doing what's right, regardless of
Yes.
if they can make money, fine. If they don't,
Exactly.
fine. It's
Yeah.
Well, that's not exactly, I don't think, if I may just add a little bit to that. No, we don't care about their profit in general, we don't. But we do have an obligation to make sure we have lots that will sell.
Sure.
And that are available to people. So if we set standards so that we don't care what they make, but nobody can buy, or if we set a standard for it's only one kind of lot and people who want other things have nothing to buy, then we haven't done our job either. So directly, no, sir, that's not our concern, but some of our concerns kind of overlap with that.
I just happened to think about it. Matt just touched on it the other night to see Stamping Ground meeting. One of the things he did say was to help provide affordable housing, and this definitely helps because of the smaller homes that are going to be built, which we've discussed that before. There's not many smaller homes right now being built.
But you can have a lot of smaller homes and then some even much bigger ones than the 75. So this average is still be 75 and still
Yeah.
meet that
Yeah.
requirement.
Yeah, I agree with you. Is there any more questions for Joe at this point? You good, Frank? For right now? Okay. The applicant, Mr. Billings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Give me just a second, please. I got a lot of stuff here. Last time I was up here, I drew a big crowd. I don't know what happened tonight.
Ran them all out.
Girls basketball.
We told them you were coming tonight and they all left.
I think last time was standing room only and back in the hallway, and there was a lot of them.
I think they're supporting the girls' basketball team.
I don't blame them for where they are instead of here. Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Mr. Perkins, Mr. Kane and staff, my name is Nathan Billings. I'm from Billings Law Firm in Lexington. I represent the applicant, HSC Ventures. As you all know from our prior workshops on both this preliminary subdivision plat and also from the zone change hearings and workshops that happened in the fall, we're working on the Betty Griffith Trust property just north of Champion Way in the schools. Mr. Kane's done, I think, a very good, very thorough job of going through our plan and raising sort of the issues in it. I'm going to tonight sort of address this two ways. He had his presentation about sort of the overall scope. What I'm really going to do is, one, I'm going to focus on his recommended variances and conditions, and then talk you through on what we suggest and what we would submit. The first thing is, in front of each of you all should be a packet that Matt was kind enough to circulate beforehand. I want to make a correction just so you're aware of it. It has 4 tabs on the front. I did not have time to change this. I had to leave for a judicial swearing in Fayette County. But I have number 2. I'm actually going to pass out to you at the end of my hearing. I thought it would be easier so it doesn't get confusing on what we're recommending on variances and proposed findings. So if you look through here, number 1 is going to be my walkthrough of the staff report, and what you'll see is we're in almost agreement on almost every single point Joe went through. The second is going to be my red line comments of his proposed findings. So it sort of takes the chart, walks through with some comments. The second is a red line of Joe's proposed, or Mr. Kane's proposed findings and conclusions. I'll actually pass out a clean copy of those at the end, which is our suggested motion. And number 3 is Mr. Kane has been using the drawing that was submitted back in February. Even from the workshop on Monday, we've continued to make changes. So I'm going to leave this up here on the screen because it is largely the same. There's a couple of minor changes that I will walk you through, and they're largely because that's the things we heard from the commission on Monday's workshop, but I'll point those out to you in this process. So if you all first want to turn to tab A on this, or tab 1, if you recall, back in February, and I wanted to read it to you, the staff, Joe did, Mr. Kane, pardon me for saying that, Mr. Kane did a very thorough staff report in February, and at that point in time, his recommendation was this. He says, based upon those findings and the preliminary subdivision plat, he thought was incomplete and it lacked key information. It doesn't comply with the conditions of zoning approval. He talked about some other things, and he said that staff recommends postponement to create 465 single-family lots in order for the applicant to address the issues raised in the staff report in a comprehensive manner. That was the recommendation in February, and based upon that, we've postponed for a month. If we come forward to the staff report that was issued last Friday, again, Mr. Kane has done a very good and thorough job, but tonight, his recommendations are, and I'm reading from his report, based on the findings above, and that's the 4 or 5 pages of notes that he's just walked through. He says, based on the findings above, that the application doesn't comply as submitted. He says that planning staff is not opposed to the general layout and subdivision scheme and recommends approval with some changes to lot widths, sizes, arrangement, and the following variances and conditions. And then he very articulately goes through 6 proposed variances and 24 conditions. I think you will see that as I walk through each one of those with you all, we're in not just large agreement, I would say overwhelming and significant, and with 1 or 2 minor exceptions, almost unanimous agreement with his staff report and his conclusions. So the first one I would talk about is the condition of his variance request, and this again is in tab 1 in the chart. The first page says variances number 1 is just reducing the separation distances on 25. We agree with that, and that's largely because there's a karst area to the south. Can I borrow the pointer? The laser pointer? So this is mainly because right here, there's a karst area here, and we have to have enough room for the right turn lane to create, so it decreased the distance here. We still have to get state approval of that, so there's not really been any negative about that. I think everyone is in agreement. Number 2 was to reduce lot width minimum. We had a significant number of 50-foot lots on our prior plan. Following the workshop on Monday, if you want to go and look at our plan, we have agreed to the 55-foot minimum, and we have removed every lot, except there's some cul-de-sacs, but that's because the cul-de-sac flares out. Every rectangular lot that is less than 55 foot has been removed on the plan. The net effect of that is conjoined with the minimum lot size of 6,000 square feet, and it drops the density on this project from 465 as originally submitted, which I read to you from February, down till today we're going to be at probably 442 residential lots. There's 443 buildable lots, but one of those is an HOA lot. So we agree with the staff recommendation on the variance. What that does then is leads us to the front yard setbacks. Our proposal when we filed was 20 foot in the front and 20 foot in the rear, largely because we have a preference of larger rear yards versus front yards. But as we told you at the workshop, we're open to what the Planning Commission wanted. And I think the discussion around the table is pretty prevalent that they prefer a 25-foot front yard setback. So we have agreed with that, with one exception, and that is in the center area where there's tree protection area here. And this is going to go on to a condition later on that I'll get to, but I need to sort of incorporate both of them together, is that the front yards here on these lots would still be 25, so that allows a 25-foot rear setback. Now, for conceptual purposes, this isn't going to be every single lot we have, but the average lot is 110 foot deep or so. with a 25-foot setback. Most of our building footprints are in a 30 by 50-foot plan. Some are a little less, some are maybe a little more, but that's the vast majority of what we do. So if you have 25 feet plus 50 feet gives you 75 foot of depth. That gives you 35 feet from the rear of the property to the rear property line, if we have a 25-foot setback. If people want to build a patio, that still gives a 25-foot buffer between a 10-foot patio or pergola and the edge of the property line. So even with that, with the staff recommendation of a 25-foot in the front yard, we're fine with that. The only exception we'd ask for is along this tree line that the front yards be 20 feet, just because we think that extra 5 feet in that tree preservation area, when you look at that area, it actually gives 40 foot in backyards. So you have 80 foot from house to house, which helps protect that tree preservation area in the middle. But that's the only exception for that setback. And so I've got a proposed nuanced change to the staff report only with respect to those lot numbers. Number 4, the reduced side yard setbacks from 10 foot to 7.5 feet. We agree with that. Practically, it's not going to matter in most lots. The reason is with a 55-foot lot and a 30-foot, again, typical house setback, that leaves 12.5 and 12.5 feet on each side. So you're actually going to have a 25-foot width between houses, which is, it's actually greater without a variance than the minimums required in this. But again, that's because we've agreed to the 55-foot lot width. Variance number 5 is reduce the rear yard setback from 25 foot to 20 foot. We agreed with that, again, except for the lots along the tree preservation area to help give a larger buffer on that block only. And then finally is reduce the minimum lot size from 7,500 square feet to 6,000 square feet. Our minimum lot size before was around 5,400. At one point we had a drawing with 5,000. Those were just too small. We've agreed with staff on this, and so we have, on the drawing you'll see in front of you, we have worked our butts off since Monday, and we have made sure that every one of our lots now complies with a 55-foot width, and it complies with a minimum of 6,000 square feet. The average lot size now is going to be well over 7,500 square feet. And not only is it over 7,500 square feet, but let me make sure I go the right way on this. That'll go up and down, Joe. So Mr. Kane made some comments that he doesn't want the R1C area here included in the average lot size. We have excluded it. He doesn't want the C1 included in the average lot size. We have excluded it. The only area that we still believe we can include is this area in the front with the buffer zone. At the February workshop, that was probably the predominant discussion item, was how to calculate the average lot size, which is where we agreed to go back. Following that hearing, I think the comment from Mr. Solsky was Mr. Perkins wasn't able to be at that meeting. Go talk to Mr. Perkins and figure out some of that. So following that meeting, I called Mr. Perkins on the phone, had a discussion about whether to include that, whether we could include it. From that, did a conceptual drawing, went and met with him. From that, went and met with Mr. Kane. And so we feel confident that in the very outset of this case, the reason this buffer was created here was, in our opinion, not to limit the density of the subdivision. It was to create a screening buffer for the houses that would be here from the roadway and the houses in Stonehenge from the subdivision, because the existing tree line there's a sort of a misconception that all of that tree line will be gone. That's not quite right. Part of the tree line will be gone for road improvements, but there's part that is possible or will likely still remain. And I'm going to get off on a side note, but because we have to pull in a right-of-way here, this tree line will be affected. There's a large distance along here where we're not expanding the right-of-way. Once that pull in to the right starts again, we'll have to cut into the tree line. And then once this commences again, we're not affecting that tree line. So I don't know the exact mathematics of it, but somebody thinks we're just going to cut all the trees down there. We want to preserve as much as possible. I mean, one is it helps us, it creates the buffer, it's less planning we have to do, it's more mature trees, it's less cost. That's sort of the win-win in the process. But it's clear we have to remove a bunch of it for the right turn lanes in. So anyway, coming back to the square footage inside of this, that buffer was created as part of the residential area. It was not created as part of the conservation area in the back. And so we feel comfortable that under the regulations, it can be included in the average lot size. And in fact, what you'll see is there's an HOA lot right here, and all of this, the HOA lot is included in the same lot number, so it is technically a buildable lot. Although it won't be a residential lot, it is a buildable lot and can have a structure or a residence on. So that, if you look through the staff recommendations on variances, we agree with what they are, with the exception of changing the lots here. The front yard would be 20 instead of 25 foot, which would allow the rear yard to be increased to 25 feet instead of 20 feet. Moving to the next page, conditions of approval. There are 24 that Mr. Kane went through you. I'm not going to go through every one of them again. What I'm going to go through is the ones where we need discussion points. By and large, of the 24, there's about 16 or 17 that are typical or ones that we have no objection to. You can see through here, we just sort of say agree, and we don't have a lot of else comment. There may be a clarification, but you'll see we don't have a lot to add. If we've agreed, we say we've agreed. So the first one is the community-wide open space network be integrated into the design that incorporates drainage areas and karst features. Part of this comment is still a little bit vague to us, but we believe this. The overall farm, when we filed the zone change, the overall farm we thought was 122.2 acres. We've now completed our survey of the property. We'll be closing later this month on the property, and it incorporates 123.5 acres. Within that 123.5 acres, there are approximately 22 to 24 tree protection, open space, landscape buffers, or conservation area, which essentially means our net developable area is 100 acres. If you were to think of it this way, if you have a 123 acre farm that you could develop however you wanted to, and you didn't have water constraints, floodplain, etc., the best you would be able to do with your right-of-ways is you're going to hit about 22 acres plus or minus for your right-of-way. That would leave you about 100 acres to build on. If you took the current net density requirements of 4.4 times 100 acres is going to be about 440 acres. I'm an attorney, I'm not good at math, but I can multiply 4.4 times 100, gets me 440. Now, that's an approximate, I understand that, but the point of that is to say, if you had that situation, you would not have a development that has 23 acres of preserved green space, open space, and landscape buffers that incorporates, and we think we like this as a key design feature of this development, an 8-foot wide asphalt trail that connects the front here, runs all along to the back. At this tree preservation area, a second tree preservation and trail area continues along here. Wrong way, sorry. Picks up here, and that tree preservation and an 8-foot wide asphalt path comes all the way up to here. It crosses the road, and it continues back to this area here. We have connected the front of the subdivision with the back of the subdivision, not by the typical 4-foot concrete sidewalks that you see in most subdivisions. We've incorporated into an 8-foot multimodal trail for walking, biking, etc., strollers, but also, once it hits that tree preservation area, preserving all of the trees back along that right away. And you'll also see we have revised our street cross sections, which is one of the reasons why our cross sections are a little different than your typicals, because we are doing something a little bit atypical. Most street sections in Georgetown don't have an 8-foot trail next to them and don't have a tree preservation area. So our typical street section has to have some accommodating factors to create that. So we believe with the conditions of approval, we've created over 22 acres of open space already, an integrated trail system and landscape buffers, widened, as Mr. Kane pointed out earlier, as part of the zoning approval, widened the landscape buffers with respect to the property along the school and the property to the north urban service boundary. Back along the railroad track is largely irrelevant. I mean, you'll see, 60% of it is already covered in the green space, so that landscape buffer probably doesn't matter too much. But most subdivisions, you're not going to have 20% of your property be protected like this one does. So we think staff comment number 1 is adequately addressed with the plan. Condition number 2, and this is the second, I think, probably big variance from the staff report, is they've suggested that in the area where there is, I apologize, I keep going the wrong way, in the area where this tree preservation is to make those lots 125 foot deep, They average somewhere between 106 and 112 along through here, with the average being 109 or 110. The problem making them 125 feet is once we do that, and you add it on both sides, it necessarily bumps down and bumps up. And because this is right here, this landscape buffer is already created, you essentially lease 2 blocks of streets to this development. And because of the other things that are being incorporated in here, that's why we've asked for that front yard setback to be 20 feet, that rear yard to be 25 feet, which creates a minimum of 50-foot setbacks. But if you really look at the distance between the houses, will be 80 feet back there, which we think helps avoid the problem that you all have seen in Ward Hall, because we want to avoid it too. We want to have areas that the houses aren't going back there and just cutting down trees willy-nilly. We want to create enough buffer, and that's the way we think we can do it. The third condition of approval is the lot area in the back should not be included in the average lot size calculation. We've agreed, it's been removed, and we're still well over 7,500 square feet. We have made one change since Monday. There was a comment about whether we should have 1 lot, residential lot back here, we should have 3 residential lots back here. How are we going to access across the creek? Here was our suggested solution. Let's just remove this from development at this point right now. And so you'll see on your plan, there's a lot number there. And there's a note that I've added that just says this, it's a little bit less than 3 acres, but this 3-acre parcel right here is not part of the development plan right now. We can't build on it, we can't develop it, we can't subdivide it. And let's just kick the can down the road on that parcel and just say this: it shall not be subdivided, developed, or built upon without subsequent planning commission approval. We don't get any benefit at this point because we're not using it in our average lot size calculation. It doesn't affect our density, any of our calculations, but it also means we don't have to figure out all of the intricacies of development at this point. We may never be able to get it done. Maybe we sell it to the school. I don't know. It just says this: we're not getting any benefit at this point from that acreage, and you all don't have to make a decision on how we have to develop it, whether it's a low water crossing or a bridge. We think that's a better solution for today with respect to those 3 acres back there. Comment number 5, conditions, we agree we have to comply with Kentucky Department of Transportation road specs and get an encroachment permit to the transportation work. That's a typical sign-off, a typical condition of approval on a project like this that requires integration with the state highway, or it's federal highway if it's maintained by the state. Number 6 is redesign the roadway cross-sections. If you see in our prior drawings, we had 4 sections in the back on a prior drawing, and we had 6 before. I met with, I talked to Ben on the phone earlier this week, and I met with Mr. Kane. And so if you look in the 3rd tab and look at our sections, what you'll see is on the back half, we've reduced it to 3 cross sections. And on the front, we've reduced it to 5 cross sections. To 6 cross sections. But here's why we think, one, it can be dealt with the construction plans. But here's what we have made sure we did. We came back to staff and asked them, what are some of the concerns about this collector road and this collector road? We don't necessarily agree it should be a collector, but for this discussion, we're assuming, okay, what are your concerns? And they've said, one, they didn't like the medians. So you'll see in our current drawing, we've removed medians. Fire trucks don't like it, garbage trucks don't like it, school buses don't like that, snow plows don't like it, the people who are here and trying to back out don't like it. So we said, fine. We thought it was a great traffic calming device, but if it's a better process, we'll remove it. So we've removed that. Second, there was a desire not to have parking along these collectors, and we've said, hey, we thought it was a great solution, but there's no, we're not sold on that idea. If that's a better solution not to have parking on here, we are fine with that, and it helps simplify the cross-section, so we've removed those aspects. So we said, staff, what do you want this width of the road to be? And the discussion was, in a typical collector, you have a 41-foot wide road, but you can put parking on one side, which is an 8-foot parking spot. So you take your 41 feet, subtract your 8 foot for parking, gives you a 33-foot wide road. 6 inches for curb is 32 wide of pavement. That's the simple way. So we've redesigned our cross sections to make sure that on the collector from here back and from here back, we have a 32-foot wide section of pavement to make sure that those collectors are wide enough to handle city service vehicles, school buses, etc. We've also done this. These are not typical for the preliminary subdivision plat stage, but because of the concerns on the traffic, we thought it was better to discuss these at this time. and that you'll find we have these traffic calming devices. In the drawings you have, the traffic calming, what are called bump ins, have been moved to the second intersection. There's a planned four-way stop at the fourth intersection. One, because it stops traffic from just zooming up and down all the way by a stop sign. Second is, if the north-south connector is ever made, it then provides a natural stop at that place for that traffic. The same thing is true on the back portion of the property then. You would come back, and where the north-south connector is, there would be an additional four-way stop in here, and then there would be an additional bump ins right here. What that would mean is you basically have 4 blocks before a stop sign, 4 blocks before a stop sign, but in the middle of those 4 blocks, every 2 blocks, you have some traffic calming devices. That's still a construction plan detail that would have to be finalized, but we wanted to get ahead of it and be proactive and figure out what are the concerns, and so we've tried to address those since the workshop on Monday. Moving on to the next condition of approval, which is number 7, is the berm fencing be installed on the landscape buffer along 25 prior to approval of the final plat. Of the final plat for the first phase of development. Basically what staff has asked, and largely we have said this is okay. This area here has a cross-section that will include, this is the cross-section up here, the right-of-way, a 4-foot horse plank fence, a berm, and 2 rows of trees, 40 foot on center, which when you're looking at them actually means they're 20 foot, every 20 foot 2 rows. The trees may have to come back on the berm, that's a cross-section for construction, but staff has asked that we construct that berm and those trees as part of the first plat. As staff told you, our first plat is intended to be back in this area, behind that tree preservation area. And so we would have to create those construction details in the front that typically wouldn't have to be done until we would actually come and plat these lots here. So we're accelerating what we would otherwise not have to do until year 3, 4, or 5, or whenever we develop this. We said we're okay with that concept. And so what we've asked for is to say, let's just plant the minimum required. Staff asked for 10-foot trees. We've consulted with 2 tree experts. The first is Dave Leonard. If you all know Dave, who's up in Stamping Ground. The second one is Greg Spivey at Landscapers Paradise in Lexington with this question. If we plant this berm, or at least where trees are removed, and we have to plant this now, with a 5-foot high tree, and the soonest we would get to this area is in 5 years. What would those trees look like in 3 years? Both of them said you would have the desired 2-inch caliper 10-foot tree within 3 years. In other words, if this takes us 5 years, you have an even bigger berm, a bigger buffer than what the landscape ordinance would require. So we would have to accelerate as part of the accommodations on a PUD. Have to accelerate the requirements to get some of the benefits of the PUD. That's just one of those trade-offs, which we have said, okay, then let's not do 10-foot trees. If we do 5-foot trees now, we think it will satisfy that. Next is, and this is really going to go through sort of the rest is sort of check marks. Number 8 is the dry run watershed. We agree. Number 9 is identified the blue line streams. We agreed. The HOA area number 2 is now actually in the back of lots, and we've created not just a tree preservation area, but back in here, we've actually got a stream protection area buffer too that's outlined in green, so that you can see it a little better than just where the black and white lines are. As you can see, these lots are deep, but they also have a significant amount of water protection in that area. Number 10, we agree there's not enough information at this point to make those calculations. These are typically construction plans. We understand staff's concerns. We agree with them. And we think that this is, in our opinion, it's one of the things that our geotechnical engineer will have to make calculations. We'll have to show it to staff in the construction plan phase, but we agree with the staff condition of approval. Number 11 is the same. It's a construction plan issue, but we agree with the staff condition. Number 12 is the same, that all the depressed areas, environmental sensitive areas, be inspected. I talked personally to Jonathan Hale, the geotech, this week, and I said, have you looked at this and make sure that we can build on these lots? And he said, we have to certify a report before you can build a single house on any of these areas, and we will make sure that we certify that. And if there's a lot that you can't build on, you're going to know, because it's our malpractice and it's our liability if it's not done right. And I said, as long as you have to certify it, I have no problem in saying that's what has to be done as a condition of approval. So we've agreed with the staff report on that. Number 13, the floodplain, we agree. Number 14 is the 16-foot paved driveway in the back. We think that's moot now because we've said, let's just not do anything on this back area, and we can't do anything without planning commission approval, so we don't have to make a decision on whether it's a bridge or a low water crossing. We just don't do anything in that area right now. 15, comply with the HOA ordinance. I wrote the ordinance. We agree. I've got draft deed restrictions already done for this property. 16, construction plans, and the rest of 16 to 24 are all your typical conditions, and we agree with every one of them. Based upon that, what you'll see at tab 2 is, and Mr. Kane was very accommodating when I asked him for a word version. I took the staff's proposed findings, conclusions, variances, and conditions of approval, and I've redlined them for you with what I've just gone through with the proposed changes. So you'll see, for example, at the very beginning, it's not 461 residential lots. It's now 442 residential lots. It's 443 numbered lots, but 442 residential lots. Again, if you look at if we had a 123-acre farm, you took out approximately 1/5 of it for right-of-way, it would leave you 100 acres. We're going to be at the exact density that you talked about earlier, Mr. Wiseman, which is right about 440. The setbacks we've agreed with, except that area where the tree preservation is, I explained. The side yard setbacks from 10 to 7.5 we've agreed. There's one note I would accept, which is there's double fronted lots on here, and they don't have a 7.5-foot setback. They actually have a 25-foot setback. Because you can't, if you build a house 7.5 foot next to the right of way, it's too close for line of sight. So double fronted lots have a wider, and we've just suggested, and there's a note on the plat that says instead of 25 foot to 20 foot, and the reason is we have a 6-foot fence easement on both sides of this. We don't want homeowners coming in and putting 6-foot privacy fences right up to the edge of the right of way. So in order to stop, what I call that the stockade effect, like a cattle chute, in order to stop homeowners from doing that, on both sides of the main boulevard here, we have created a 6-foot fence easement that the HOA maintains, a 4-board horse fence from the front of the subdivision here on both sides, starts right here in the front, and runs all the way back on both sides. We think that will protect the integrity of the entrance and the main drives in the subdivision that don't become just street, entrance street, fence, entrance street. 4-board horse fence. They can still put their fences up. There's a 4-foot picket fence requirement in our deed of restrictions, so they're lower. But again, it helps protect some of the integrity of the neighborhood. But that's the side yard exception is on those 25-foot setbacks to 20-foot. If you go through the rest of them, for example, we've deleted number 2 because of the variances above, and we deleted number, the second one was number 14 was deleted. That leaves us with 22 conditions of approval. For your, we have gone through, and although it doesn't have a lot of changes in here, one change I didn't comment on yet is the HOA lots. You see the residential lots at the staff at the workshop on Monday. We had the residential lots coming all the way into here. From the comments at the workshop, it seemed clear that the commission have preferred a single HOA lot all the way through here, owned by the HOA. So the drawing in front of you removes the extension of those homeowner lots into that buffer space, and now it's a single HOA lot, comes all the way to here. There's an HOA lot here. So those individual lots will just stop at that 150-foot buffer. And then number 2, in the back, we had deeper residential lots, and you'll see in your drawing here, they still extend about 10 foot off the floodplain, and that's really just because of the geography. It's easier to sort of go 10 feet, but it's not the substantial increase. But again, none of the area in the floodplain is included in the average lot size. So we're not using that to get any benefit at all. So that area right there was a question about should the individual homeowners own in the floodplain, except for that 10, it sort of varies on the floodplain, but you get the idea if you just draw a straight line. It's drawn on your drawing so you can see it. Other than that, we've extended the trail system from the tree buffer here forward, and the tree buffer here forward, and that's in our cross section. You'll see the one that is I can't think of this is hard to see some. It's in FF, has an 8-foot sidewalks multimodal trail system built in your side section. You'll see on here. Other than that, it's really the same as it was on Monday with those couple of nuanced changes. But we thought it was beneficial to get that turned around quickly and in your hands. With that, tab 2 again is a red line of the staff report. If I may approach, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
If I could just split these in half, maybe pass one half right, one half left. I would suggest that these are conditions of approval. These are conditions of approval that the Planning Commission could make a motion on and vote to approve. They are slightly modified from staff report. I did the red line so that you all could understand and see all the changes we made, so that no one would feel uncomfortable figuring out, well, maybe they didn't change this, maybe they did change this. Tab number 2 shows every change I made in the document, so that it's transparent and it's clear to you all, and you all can walk through, and you'll see the changes are exactly what I've told you in the presentation tonight. That's a lot of information to go through. I'm happy to answer any additional questions, but I hope I've covered the things adequately.
One question I got for you, Mr. Billings. On those, on that 40-foot tree preservation strip there.
In the middle?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So what I'm assuming is the 25-foot setback would be off of the property line, not the tree preservation.
That's correct. So if you had you have 2 lots back to back. And so the typical setback would be 20 feet everywhere else. In this area, it would be a 25-foot setback, which means you couldn't put a pergola or a patio any closer than 25 foot to the rear, which gives a 50-foot clear buffer. But you'd actually have, under our typical house dimensions, really 80 feet between the houses. But that 50-foot wide, we think is more than enough to protect. Most of those trees don't have a 50-foot girth of their drip line. And that's typically what the arborist tells you is you need to protect the root system under the drip line for your main root systems. So that 50-foot would be more than adequate to protect that tree line. The other thing is this tree line, there are some good trees in this tree line. I mean, there are some oaks. There's also a bunch of junk trees in there. There's a bunch of honeysuckle. There are some calorie pear. While it is a tree line that will be preserved, there is stuff in there that's not good. It's not healthy. There's stuff that's there invasive. So it's not like somebody planted a row of sycamore 60 years ago and they've been untouched by time. It's a mixture of, and both the one across and the one going back. But regardless of that, it's still a preserved area.
I think my only concern on that is, you know, if you get a tree really close to that line, is it going to be hard to preserve it, or, you know what I'm saying, keep that tree from dying? Because we had one here just a month or so ago, and I mean, they were getting into the roots of the tree, even though the tree was still in the preservation area, and that's the only thing I worry about there.
Well, were they, and I don't know enough about that situation to talk about. If that's why we've suggested the rear setback is 50 foot. The tree preservation is 40 feet. We actually have 5 foot on either side of the tree preservation area. It's an additional buffer.
Yeah. But you don't understand what I'm saying, if a tree is right on that 40-foot line, or.
Yeah, because they're not, I mean, the trees never are an exact
Yeah.
straight line.
Yeah.
You know, trees always maybe zigzag.
go in and
If you
out.
go out on that tree line, it's a,
Brett might be able
but
to
it's a
answer
pretty,
that. I
it's a
know
pretty
he's
straight
been
line
there.
of those trunks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that, what it is, it's an old farm fence. And so, you know, trees grow up in farm fence, so
Usually just-
you'd be surprised, you know, they are really
Fairly straight.
pretty tight. Because farmers don't like to lose, you know, tillable land.
You don't have a variance of trunks in this area that are 10 or 20 feet off. You may have 3 or 4 feet each way as that fence sort of meanders, but it's a fairly typical straight fence line.
Does anyone else have any other questions? Frank, you want to? I will say, everything we asked you to do Monday, it looks like you took care of. And
I've tried to. I mean, I understand that we still have some minor differences with staff, but I think that you know, one of the things that's easy to come here at night and for you all to listen to presentations, and that you know that I hope you all appreciate is, I mean, staff spends countless hours. I mean, I'll say dealing with me, working with me.
Dealing with you.
Well, that's right. That's fair enough. And it's easy to come here in a night and have an hour and a half presentation and talk. But what you all don't see is, I mean, there's hours that they sit and they go through plans, or they talk on the phone, or we talk to them an idea, we do a concept, we go down and sit with them, and they're always great. Even if we disagree on a point, they're always great to sit down, make time for me to come over, spend an hour, talk with them an issue or more. And I do believe this. I read the February report for a reason only a month and a half ago when the plan was submitted and staff wrote that report. This plan was substantially different than it is today. Substantially different. I think that the end product of this preliminary subdivision plat is a much improved product. I think if you look at it in a holistic way, meaning where we started with 123 acres and what we have, it complies with the intent of a PUD ordinance. There may be some nuances that we have some disagreement with staff, and I've suggested some solutions. But I think when you look across the board, if you look in tab 1, staff said do X, we said that we agree. Staff said do this, we said that we agree. We went through that, and on the development side, it's not always easy. You've got to make decisions. And I understand you're right, Mr. Wiseman. You all don't make a decision whether a developer makes profit. I've never disagreed with that. On our side, we do have to make decisions about what we can do, though. And so what we've tried to do is work with staff, and we think that this is a much improved product. It will be a great project. We still have stuff to do. There's a lot of stuff we still have to do. We're not turning dirt tomorrow. But there's a lot of open space. There's a great trail system. There's a lot of tree areas that are protected. 20% of the property is protected from development, which you hardly ever see in any other developments. Abbeville, Oxford, they don't have 20% of their project that's green space. Pleasant Valley, the only area they have is in the back section where that creek system is that's been deeded over to the city now, which the city doesn't want this anymore. So the front side of Pleasant Valley doesn't have hardly any green space. They went in between two farms that are probably 5-acre tracts. So thank you all.
I think you did a great job of accommodating our concerns, and I think the developer did a great job of engaging your services. Your communication skills are to be admired.
Thank you, sir.
You hear the old professor? I am over. He's over critiquing him the whole time.
Do I hear that as a yes vote? Do I hear that as a yes vote?
I would have one suggestion. If we're gonna allow these, this tree preservation area that's going in.
Which one are you talking about?
When we asked for 125 feet, there's a reason for that. I think what we need to do is widen these lots out. If we're not gonna give any on the depth, those lots all need to be at least 65 feet wide. Shrink a few lots in here, and that way you can put a footprint on there that maybe goes. You can put more of a square house in there, or a larger house that goes side to side, and leave room in the back. Because I definitely don't want that tree preservation area messed with. That's what we've run into time and time again. You don't need a lot in there that's 55 feet wide. They need to be. If you're not going to allow the depths, widen them out. On both sides of that.
We have some of those in there, though.
Not even 70 feet might be required. I don't know. I think those would be some of the most desirable lots you'll have.
And I think if you look on there, Mr. Smith, that they're not all 60 foot, but there's about 25% of them are 60 foot or greater already.
I agree with that, but what I'm saying, if we're going to make the concession to allow you to maintain those, I'd prefer to keep the 25-foot setback in the front and you just change the footprint of the house instead of having a deep house, have a more square house. And that way you can maintain that distance from that tree line in the back. I think those would be some of your, if you got mature trees going across there, those, at some point, those would be some desirable lots, I think.
I understand.
Especially with the.
Sometimes I've got to do the best I can with an imperfect landscape, and I appreciate the comment.
I don't want to make you lose a street up through here. I can see if you try to shrink that or try to make that lot 125 feet deep, it's going to necessitate that you just couldn't make it work, not with this footprint. But if you're going to keep them 110 feet deep, widen them out.
Mr. Combs just came up. He said even on the rear lots there, we can actually do a 35-foot setback on those. and they'd be fine in the rear, but I think 25 foot is greater than the tree preservation area.
Yeah, I was trying to do the math too, how far we could get off of the tree line, push it forward.
What we keep
Joe.
running into is people say, well, it won't work, and they take the tree down. That kind of defeats the purpose of a tree preservation area.
Off the, so the front yard setback starts off of the curb, right?
Edge of right away.
It's actually the sidewalk.
It's behind the sidewalk typically.
Behind the sidewalk.
So you're gonna have about a 2 foot utility strip or 2 to 4 foot utility strip, a 4 foot sidewalk. So there's 8 foot from the back of the curb, and then you would have on
Yeah, I
that.
think on your thing on the street, whatever you call that little drawing again. It's a section of the street, it's like 6.5, or
Yeah, there's a
10.5
4.5.
feet.
That's actually going to be a continuous. Maybe it's 6.5. As long as I can't see the detail on the little ones, but
It says 6.5 and 4, which makes it 10.5
Yeah.
to the back of the sidewalk.
and then you have the 20 to the house. So you basically got 30 feet. But I understand the concern that larger vehicles may hang on the sidewalk. But once you run 20 foot from that point, with our typical 50 foot house gives us 70 feet. With 110 foot gives us 40 feet from the back of the house to the middle, to the property line. Then you would reverse that, so there's 80 feet sort of house by house. You know, you could do a 30 foot. We've suggested 25 foot, but you could increase that buffer if you just want to get outside those drip lines to protect that. Those trees out there just don't have a 40 foot width drip line. So anything over 40 feet is going to be outside, I think, enough to protect it.
I'd still rather widen them out.
Joe, do you have any major concerns about Mr. Billings' changes here on his presentation?
Just the depth of those lots, that back of the tree preservation, I think I kind of agree with Mr. Smith, they should be widened or maybe deepened or widened from the other.
This may not have the same issues that we've had in other places. If there's any change in grade at all, especially if there's an uphill grade, by the time they grade back to it, they end up with a big berm at the back, and they end up, I say, well, the roots have been compromised, we have to take the tree down. And you don't have a tree left. If you're gonna use those lots and maintain the tree line, the best thing to do is to keep the 25-foot setback in the front.
And if you,
I don't want to shrink it. If there's gonna be 25 feet, let's keep 25 feet throughout the entire subdivision. And then
if
let's
you
widen
look,
the lot out to where you can put it, instead of having a deep house, have a little shallower house that's slightly wider.
if you look on the plan, it may not be too hard to see on the detail, but all of the ones on this side are already 60 foot or greater. The actual ones on the edges are are even more than 60 feet. Then you have a couple ones here that are 60 feet. The rest of them are 55. This is greater than 55. That's greater than 55. These are 55s. And that last one is greater than 55 is, I think it's 82. The ones that interact with the street require a larger footprint already, just because you have a side yard that requires a bigger setbacks. Every time it's always bumped out a few more feet.
There are a couple of 55s in here, aren't there?
There are. I'm just saying that on this side, they're all 60s.
Right.
In here, there's some 60s. And then starting about maybe a third of the way, maybe 40% of the way down, then they're 55s. That's greater than 55. That's greater than 55. And all these on the top side of that are 55s, and that's more than 55.
Which one I'm saying is lose 4 lots, 2 on one side, 2 on the other, widen them out just slightly. Try to get to 60, 65 feet. That's the only horizontal tree preservation area that there is.
I know. Well, he's saying do your ranches instead of your deep ones. It doesn't matter. So your ranch is 40, so you could do 10.5.
Mr. Billings, I feel like I'm in a divorce court hearing. If you give them the 4 lots, I did the math, you're going to go from, on average, 56 to, or minimum 55, 6 more feet. 61 would be the minimum on any lot. You give 4 lots up, we're down to 438 instead of 442.
You can do that with a house that's
one on those.
Yeah.
It's gonna go on.
You gotta get up and state your name and
The
stuff.
house
You
that
can't
would
just
go on.
State your name, George.
George Kawaj, I'm the developer of one of them, Jeremy. The house that goes on a 55-foot lot is gonna be the same one that's gonna go on a 65, a 75, 100.
I'm just
That
thinking
house
for,
is stated to go on whichever lot.
There's no way you can reorient, I mean, you can't
You're,
change it.
you're just gonna have more side yard if you go 65, that's all.
It's not gonna be the same depth?
It's the same depth, no matter which lot it goes on.
I was thinking for Mr. Smith's benefit, and I just took away 2 lots averaging 60 foot. You give
Oh,
120
yeah, I understand.
divided by 19. You had 6 foot to each person's lot, so it'll help with tree preservation.
Right, but it would,
It might give them more room to put a deck on the side.
it wouldn't help the back, because it's the same
Right.
cube, it's
Same
gonna be
depth.
on a 55, it's gonna be on a
Still be
65.
110 foot deep.
The
But
same
they could possibly put a
square of house, if that makes
Raised deck,
sense.
you
Does that
still
make
have to,
sense?
on your structures.
Yes.
Your setback, if it's a wooden structure, if you put a deck inside the house, it has to be 7.5 foot up. Am I right, Charlie? As long as it's a wooden structure, if it's concrete, then it
I mean, if
doesn't
that's
matter.
Yeah, if it's staying on the ground, no, but if it's a structure up,
If it's a
yes.
structure up, it has to be.
But
You
it's
know, your
not
side
gonna
yard
change the
setback
house.
comes into play.
No, I understand that. You're gonna have,
You're gonna have more side yard.
yeah. Are you, are there any other comments, or is that the sort of last one? Because I think to do that, I think what we can do by looking at this is there's a way, if we reduce those from 55 foot, increase the minimum along this frontage and this frontage, just said nothing should be less than 60 foot, except the corner lots, which by nature have to be larger than 60 foot. That would result in a loss of one lot here that shifts everything so that they're 60 foot, and one lot here that then shifts so they're all 60 foot. A couple of them are greater than 60 foot. So I think there's a net loss of 2, but it accomplished the 60-foot width.
These are all 60 over here already.
I think they're already 60 on the left.
Most of them are.
On the north side, oh, shoot, I don't want to turn that off.
Everything
I
is
broke
already
it.
60 foot on that.
I think
side.
everything's every 60 foot over here, and those are 60, so those are already accommodating your comments, Mr. Smith. It's just, we're moving a lot up here, moving one here. It reduces the density basically to 440 then, but it accomplishes, I think, it addresses your concern.
Yeah, that would suit, that gets rid of those 55-foot lots.
If I hear you correctly, I think that can be done.
Are we sure we can get rid of, these are all 55 feet across the back here?
But if you take one 55-foot lot out, that gives you 5 foot to add to every other house across the top. There's 11 55 foots in there. So if you take one out, you have 10 left at 55 foot. You had 5 foot to each of those 10, you get 60 feet. That's the simple. Again, I'm an attorney, so I'll let the engineer figure out the real math, but it seems to work.
I'm a banker, you're right.
Okay.
You did mention something, though. Could we go to 30-yard setback off of that tree preservation?
30 yard?
30
Or
yards?
30 feet?
Yeah.
Oh, I think that's fine. That doesn't bother us at
Yeah, I
all.
want 30 yards.
Yeah, I don't think the setback on the back bothers us at all.
I just don't want to see y'all coming back in and saying, oh, we can't build there because the trees are in the way. We've had that before, and we just don't want to see that again.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to bother us.
So go to the
No,
30.
we're just telling you, don't come back in with that, because it'd be a no.
So change that one on the
So
back to
then
30.
I think then what we would see is,
No, they wanted to go 25 on the rear, but push it out to 30. Does that make sense, Joe?
Well, I mean, I think it's 40 feet now, 20 on each lot for tree preservation. I think that's enough for tree preservation. But, I mean, the setback.
No, he's talking
The
about
setback.
rear yard.
The setback.
Rear yard setback, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, rear yard setback to 30.
it's just the building line is all it is. I think if you want to put on there, it's fine.
The way it looks on the math, the house ain't gonna get that close anyway.
I don't think it bothers us. I mean, it's just,
If you say most of them are 30 by 50, now these are larger lots, you might be able to put may still be the same
it's going
footprint.
to be 20 plus 50, it'd be 70, 35.
Does that make sense, Joe?
Yeah, my suggestion would be 30 feet, but instead of 35, because that way if somebody
I'm fine
doesn't.
with 30.
Yeah, it's
Because like I said, those trees aren't that big.
Yeah. So I
We've
think
done that for
that the only change would need to be made to the thing I've submitted to you all is on condition number 2, on variance number 2, reduce lot widths from a minimum of 70 to a minimum of 55, and then I think we would add except lots 170 to 211, which shall be a minimum of 60 foot. Because we already have some that already meet it, but that would be the way to accomplish that. And then in condition variance number 3 and number 5.
Start all over. You done got me lost.
I'm sorry?
Start all over, please. You've got me lost.
We'll go to his.
I was trying to mark it up here, what you were saying.
So I think in number 2, where it says reduce lot widths from a minimum of 70 feet to a minimum of 55 foot, comma, except lots 170 to 211 would be a minimum of 60 foot width.
And also a 30-foot.
I'm gonna get there. That's in number 3 and number 5. I was just dealing with number 2.
Okay. I got that one.
Then number 3, the last one says rear yard is 25, just say 30. And the same thing in number 5, the rear yard is 25, change to 30. I wouldn't forget about you, Mr. Smith. I just didn't want to get ahead of Mr. Jones writing stuff down. Need a clean one?
I need another clean one, because you'll take one signed if it's approved, and we'll keep one if it's approved.
We have to get one of theirs.
And actually, if you take those 2 lots out you're talking about, that's gonna increase your minimum lot size, right?
Yeah, but we're already we're already at 7,700 and some, so we're already.
It's just gonna increase it that much more.
Yeah, we're already well over the minimum average lot size.
Has everybody got that? Does anybody have any more questions for Mr. Billings? Okay, Mr. Ben does.
The roadway standards still, I think this is an issue for the city would need to weigh on as far as the amount of right-of-way and all that. They are proposing taking away sidewalk on the one side where you get the trail on one. That, we haven't had sidewalk on just one side of the street for a long time. I mean, I think you'd be approving that. The way you change condition number 6 as proposed on PSP, I think that should be struck out of there. I don't know if you got comments on.
Your variance or condition?
Your condition of approval.
Are you saying that?
I still don't agree with your cross section, I guess.
Oh, I don't think I was asking you to say like that's the final sign of the cross section. I was just saying like we know we have to deal with the trail system. We know we have to deal with the tree preservation area. We know we have to deal with the roadway width. So the reason I said that is our prior section didn't have enough width of paving that you all had concern with. We redrew them this week to make sure that our widths were what? For the collector standard, the typical width is 41 feet. But they don't want parking, so you reduce it by 8 feet, which gets you to 43.
I think that's just saying leave that language in there that says shall be approved by city.
We did leave it in there.
Oh, you did?
Well, you added redesign roadways to meet current roadway standards as proposed on PSP.
But the final design
Secure.
still has to be approved by the city and the planning commission engineer prior to construction.
Okay.
Where are you?
Number 6.
Well, if you look at his new conditions, it'd be number 5.
That's number 6. That's his new conditions.
Right, yeah, the reference of as proposed on PSP, I think that needs to be.
Just handed us
I
out.
think that's the language I think needs to be struck.
Okay, I mean, I think it's, that's fine with me. It's the one that's proposed on the PSP.
Ben,
Is that all, Ben?
are you saying there's only sidewalk shown on one side here? I can't tell that from looking.
That's where the trail is. He's showing the trail 2 feet off the curb and then no sidewalk on the other side, all the way back. Just on the one street, is that correct?
On the collector, so let me clarify. On the collector here, on all of these continuous streets, by the way, we designed these streets here, should be local, or the minimum is local. We've actually designed them to be continuous, which is an upgrade to what's required. This section right here is an entrance, so it's not, this is a little bit different, but we've suggested that instead of doing 4-foot sidewalks on both sides, we have a 6-foot fence easement on both sides, and that easement will actually have to be outside the trail going back, but that we do an 8-foot multimodal trail back on this side, instead of doing 4-foot sidewalks on both sides.
And like you mentioned on Monday, the fence is the picket fence.
It's
not
a horse
not
fence.
6 foot.
It's a 4-board horse fence.
Exactly.
And the reason is we don't want to do a sidewalk over here is if we have an 8-foot multimodal trail, we just don't think there's a need for a sidewalk on this side going all the way back. We do think it's important that there's a way for pedestrians to cross from this side of the development to this side at designated points, which is one of the reasons why we try to be proactive to say we typically wouldn't talk about traffic calming at this point, but let's talk about where stop signs are, because that's where pedestrian crosswalks need to be, and why we said let's plan for a 4-way stop to be here so you can have pedestrian crossings, and then going back to here, we would do a 4-way stop here, again with pedestrian crossings. So no matter where somebody was, within 2 blocks, they could always get across the street. We just don't think there's a need to do a sidewalk, a 4-foot on one side, and an 8-foot trail on the other side. That defeats the purpose of an 8-foot trail.
Would there be a 4-foot sidewalk on each side of all the horizontal streets?
Yeah, there's still sidewalk on all of these here, on all of these here, on all of these here, 4-foot sidewalk here, 4-foot sidewalk here. That's the only area that 4-foot sidewalk is missing, is on the south side of that main collector. In that area right there.
I do appreciate the hours and hours and hours of work that you spent with staff getting this all done.
Ben,
Yes.
you had a concern with the drainage and stuff?
Yes, I still concerned with the drainage going out through there, but there are a lot of conditions of approval to address that.
That's what I was, I thought it was in here, I just wanted to ask you that.
The layout with the lots being built right over that drain, I think is an issue I've expressed several times. But
That's something you'll follow up on when the final comes in, or, and you'll.
it'll have to, I mean, it needs to start with the Corps of Engineers. I mean, can they even build there without paying huge fines or that kind of thing?
Okay.
What's the cost? The initial report from the geotech flagged the area. I mean, there is drainage that goes, underground drainage going through there. There's irregularities in the bedrock reported, so it's a highly questionable area.
Right across the road there's all kinds of water that comes down in times of flood, and it goes into a sinkhole over there behind somebody's shed behind their house. And occasionally that shed almost floats, I guess. But all that water's going in the ground for the most part, and just occasionally it's run over. It's like you said, if that sinkhole ever blocked, you have a lot of water coming straight across there.
It's multiple sinkholes across the road. I mean, there's.
Thank you, Ben.
Mr. Smith, there's about 100 acres of land, which is to the west and to the north, that our engineers are going to have to make sure that we can, I think it's hydrologically deal with. And so you can see through the contours, the sort of natural swells that go now. We will have to have an engineered stormwater system that can handle overflow of that 100 acres. There's currently a 14-inch pipe, I think it's somewhere around in here, that crosses. That may have to be changed out when we do road improvements. But for that stuff right here, it has not been calculated yet. That'll be part of construction plans. But what we'll probably do is run down. It will have to run along an easement. It will run down and collect storm water off the streets. It will run back across a lot, run back across a lot to the street, run back across a lot, and sort of zigzag. I don't know what the size of that pipe is. I'm not smart enough. I couldn't do math. I sort of joked earlier I could do simple math, but I can't do complex math. I went to law school. All I know is this. We have engineers who do that stuff, and we've agreed with the staff that we have to do all of that stuff before we can build in that area.
Does anyone else have any questions for staff or the applicant? You, Stephen?
It's a lot better than what we, I like it much better than originally.
Yeah, I do too. I think it's a pretty good thought out plan and a lot of features that we don't have in other places, like the 8-foot blacktop path that goes all the way back. I like that with the plank fence and I think it's pretty nice.
I don't have an objection with you building across the creek over there, but I think you have to build $1 million bridge to get to it.
Right. And this just says we can't do anything on it right now. We got to come back later on to deal with it. And we don't get benefit from it right now.
You know, again, I appreciate all the work that's gone into this, months, hours, by both staff and the attorney and the applicant. I'd like to make a motion to approve with all the changes, and I'm not going to repeat all the changes because there's way too many.
One question though, Mr. Chairman. We did have the subsequent agreement after all this dealing with the lots, 170 through 211, that had the tree preservation between them. Now, what we ended up agreeing with was 60-foot minimum widths on those.
On all the lots,
A number of them already have 60.
correct.
The ones that don't, which are on the south side, south end.
They took off one lot on each side, which would allot 5 feet roughly for each lot, which would be a minimum of 60.
So
But,
from lot,
yeah, I'm trying to keep it simple,
from
so it
lot
would be.
170 to 211.
Yeah, that's all of them, but many of them are already 60. So
Correct.
the ones that aren't will be up to 60-foot width.
That's correct. The way,
But that's the only change. Otherwise,
No, the
No.
rear yard setback.
The rear yard setbacks would move to 30 feet also. So number three,
Oh.
change the 25 to 30.
This goes to 30, and this goes to 30.
all right, hold on. All right, variance number 3.
And number 5 goes to 30 feet.
All right, well, hold on though. Number 3, which had reduced front yard setbacks from 30 to 25, it goes back to 30?
No, the
No.
last sentence and the last 25 foot's going to 30. Where it
Oh,
says
I see. Oh, I
rear
got you.
yard's 30.
Except those same lots again, where front yard is 20 and rear is 25, so it will now say,
30.
30.
Rear yard is 30.
okay, where front is 20 and rear is 30?
for those lots, 170 to 211.
Yeah, okay, all right. Where, blah, 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 yeah, and that is 30, okay.
And then number 5, you need to do the same thing.
That's correct.
Yeah.
I just did by mistake, okay, I go back to 3. Where front yard is 20 and rear is 30. So both number 3 and 5 have 30 feet now.
Correct.
And this is,
Now, and in some other place, probably just at the end, I would just suggest we add then that lots 170 through 211 will be a minimum width of 60 feet.
Yeah, and I've suggested that at number 2, where it says reduce lot widths from minimum 70 feet to minimum 55, say
yeah.
except lots 170 to 211 shall be a minimum of 60 feet.
That's just fine.
And that's a little cleaner than having to,
Yeah.
it keeps them together.
There's only
Okay.
2 changes on here. Right, so I made a motion to approve with the changes that Mr. Billings proposed, in addition to number 3 and number 5 being the rear yard is setbacks 30 feet. You got a second over here?
we got a motion by Mr. Solsky, and y'all understand his motion. Mr. Billings is
I second.
conditions. Mr. Caldwell
I
has
was
already,
gonna say, he
has
beat
already
you
made
to
a
it.
second on that. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion approved. Thank you, guys.
We got a couple more things on here.
I got
It's a short agenda for tonight.
short agenda. We should have been gone. if it
About
wasn't-
I was,
7,
I was talking about last time I was here, which was what, 12:30.
and you didn't have a crowd of people.
Get some new neighbors, Mr. Wise. Mr. Wise, get some new neighbors down
Go with the officers without you. I got better chance winning here in the bathroom.
Next order of business is the open space standards.
We're going to open the public hearing on this, but Matt and I wanted to do some more research, and Michaela too. All of us wanted to do some more research based on the questions that we had at workshop on how we came up with our numbers. We started to do some, and we can have some discussion now if you want.
Why don't we just postpone till
Or we
next week, or next month?
Yeah, we can postpone it.
I'll
We
make a
just didn't
motion
want to
to postpone
advertise
it till
again,
next
so we'd
month.
like to open the public hearing at least and
well,
continue it.
Continue the public hearing to next month
Yeah,
for that.
yeah.
I'd rather have some people here for it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Sounds good.
okay.
Our next item of business is election of officers. So it's that time of year. Every March, we have to elect new officers.
I thought we done a link.
That was just a year ago, so.
Are you gonna run as vice chair?
Yeah, I will if you're okay with that.
Did you close the public hearing?
No, we're not closing it. We're gonna continue it to next month. If we close it, we have to re-advertise, so we're not
Yes.
closing. So we're gonna just
Continue next month.
continue it to next month. Y'all understand that on the public hearing? So, election of officers. So our first officer is the chair.
Rob,
Right, y'all.
just to be safe, can you officially open the public hearing?
We did.
You did? Okay.
We
I
did, and
missed
then
it.
we closed or continued. to-
It's open anyway, so,
See.
and it's continued to next month.
Okay, thanks, I just missed it.
All right.
I'll make a motion to continue Rob as chair if he would like to have it.
Well, I appreciate that. This is my last year. I'm starting my last year tonight.
I second it.
So,
Second it.
this time
I
next
second
year, I
it.
won't be sitting up here with you guys.
Yeah,
So
you will.
punish him with sticking him in that same daggone job he's got.
So I appreciate it.
He does a good
I
job.
enjoy it, so.
You do a good job,
I
Rob.
enjoy it, so. We have a motion by Mr. Solsky and a second by Mr. Cannon for me to remain the chair. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion approved.
Congratulations.
This will
Thank
be
you,
my
guys.
last year too.
Yeah. Well, this might be Mark's last couple months if all election
Year.
goes well.
Exactly. I'd like to remain vice chair. I enjoy it.
So we'll need a motion if,
I would move that we continue with Mark Solsky as vice chair.
I'll second that motion. And,
Okay.
all those in favor of Mark being the vice chair, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved.
Thank you.
Then we have our executive committee.
Who-
Which
who's-
right now-
who's Who now?
Right now, Mr. Smith, Mr. Solsky, myself, and Mr. Moran serve on the executive committee.
It doesn't have to be 2 city and 2 county.
Has to be one city, has to be, executive committee's made up of chair, vice chair, but all 4 members have to be 2 city, 2 county.
Yeah.
Evenly
So,
split.
right now, we're
County,
1 and 1.
city,
So we need a county and we need a city.
To continue.
These two have been
Continue with-
county city.
We'll make the motion.
Well, I move that we continue with our executive committee as it is.
I'll second.
All right, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed,
That's nice and easy.
motion approved. Anything else, Joe?
I believe that's it.
Meeting adjourned.